Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I am KRX, and we're going to be doing a Europa Universalis 4 tutorial series here, how to play the game. This is updated for mid-2020 since the Austria patch, the 1.3, and Emperor DLC have come out, but we are playing without DLC. This is for complete beginners. You pick the game up for $5 to $10 on sale. You don't have any of the DLC. You don't know if the DLC is worth it or not, or whatever, and we're just going to play the core game. And we've done this recently with Portugal, and I actually really enjoyed my time playing without the DLC. And I think also it simplifies the game in a way that's actually very beneficial for people who are trying to learn the game. I actually do kind of recommend people just play the base game and see if you like it and go from there. That being said, this game is just incredibly complicated. This is an incredibly complicated game, and there is no quick way to learn it. One of the things I'm trying to do, and we'll hit play and we'll go into the single player here. One of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get better at this. All right, one thing that I visualize for our channel here in the future is that we'll have a library of tutorials. Right, we'll have tutorials for Portugal, which we already have. We'll have a tutorial for the Ottomans, which we already have. That's with DLC. Ottomans with DLC, Portugal without DLC. We're going to be doing another one without DLC, and I think we're going to be picking Muscovy up here. Now, Muscovy is a very interesting country for a number of reasons. It might not kind of ring familiar, but Muscovy historically is kind of the nation that's destined to form Russia, and has a lot of really powerful things to help it do that. And it's actually a really fantastic beginner nation for a number of different reasons that we'll discover as we sort of get into the game for Muscovy. And it'll also teach us a lot of interesting concepts and such about the game as we go through that experience. But there's no reason why we shouldn't have a Castile tutorial or a France tutorial or an England tutorial and so on and so forth. So I eventually want to continue to practice making tutorials. Like, the thing is, I truly believe that like it takes a lot of time to learn the game itself, you have to practice and get better at teaching the game. This isn't something that just because someone's good at the game, they're good at teaching the game. No, it's very different. Teaching and playing are two different states of mind, right? And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make teaching an active, thoughtful process, right? This game is incredibly complicated in all the systems in the game. Part of the reason why it's complicated is because the systems in the game are not something you can learn isolated. You can't just learn, everybody wants to just learn trade. Like, Carix, tell me about trade. Trade is something that is one small piece of a larger puzzle that is intertwined with all the other systems in the game. So unfortunately, to learn anything in the game, you kind of need to build a foundation that covers the game and the idea that you're running a nation, right? And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at it more thematically from that perspective. We're going to be more telling a story about running a nation. What does that mean? We don't know how to play this game, right? Fundamentally, the people watching this probably don't know how to play the game. But what we do know is we can visualize, we can pretend, because of media and because of television shows and books and things that we've read and watched, we can kind of pretend what it's like to be the president or to be a king or to be a dictator, whatever, right? This is something that that we visualize, right, as just regular people. It's something we fantasize about or whatever, right? Maybe or maybe not. I mean, that's kind of weird to really hope to be a king or something, but you know what I mean? Like, it's something that the idea of that is not that alien to think about, right? And that's what we're doing here. We are going to be a king or a czar or a sultan or a, whatever, right? We're going to be a leader of a president, a Republican leader. We're going to be a leader of a country, and we're going to be in charge of that country's economy, a military sort of organization, a religious situation, the internal stability, the politics, the diplomacy. That's a huge aspect of the game, right? There's all these different things that we can thematically visualize that a leader, a country leader, a state leader would have to think about, right? And that's what we're going to be doing in the game, is thinking about it from that perspective and building a foundation based on what we know and asking questions and finding the answers to those questions. So it's going to be question answer. And we are going to be clicking on Muscovy. But if we notice, if we just sort of zoom out and zoom around the map, this game starts in the year 1444. It ends in 1821. That gives us about 400 years of alternate history to work through. And we can play as any country that is simulated in the world. That includes countries on every single continent, I guess, except for Antarctica, which actually, funnily enough, was actually discovered. The land, right? People knew there was ice down there, but the land itself was discovered in about 1821 or 1820 or something like that, right when the game ends, which is kind of funny. So there's no Antarctica in this game. But We have countries in South America and Central America, North America. We have countries, tons of countries in Africa, tons of countries even more in India and just Asia, Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia and Japan, right? Japan is broken up into all these little sort of shoguns or daimyos that basically fight to try to unify the Japanese region. You know, Europe is completely broken up into all kinds of little, like a little Skittles thing here with the Holy Roman Empire. And we have France is even sort of not completely unified with a bunch of little vassal states and all kinds of stuff. So the world is like, there's so much choice here. I think there's well over 400 playable nations that we could click on right now, over 400 on the screen. And there's even, I think, up to 1,000 different tags and releasable nations in the game, like different, what we call tags. We call the countries tags. So there's about 1,000 different tags in the game that you can play as, which is insane, right? There's so much replayability, but every time you play the game, you're going to get a different experience because your ecosystem is going to evolve in a different way. And this is a game about making decisions and assessing ecosystems, diplomatic ecosystems, right? Geographic ecosystems. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be playing on Muscovy, but again, we could pick Lithuania, we could pick Poland, we could pick the Ottomans. Down here, it suggests 3 nations here. It suggests the Ottomans, Castile, and Portugal as beginner player nations. I think that's pretty true, but I think Muscovy, which is also on this larger list, is actually fantastic for beginner players. So we're going to click on Muscovy, and we're going to hit play down here. And Iron Man mode basically means you only have one save file. It also enables achievements. I do recommend playing on Iron Man mode. For the sake of recording, I'm going to do normal mode. You guys as a beginner player, don't feel scared or whatever, feel free to play normal mode. That's totally fine. But Iron Man mode, the nice thing about that is it will force you to go with the flow. It's going to have you telling a story through 400 years of alternate history or however long you decide to play the campaign. And you're going to be rolling. There's going to be some hardship. There's going to be some bad decisions. There's going to be some regret. You're going to just see how that evolves. See the consequence of your actions and then be able to do better the next time. And whenever I'm playing the game, I always play on Iron Man mode. I think even as a new player, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. The reality is you're going to get into some tricky situations, whether you're playing on normal mode or Iron Man mode. It's the same game. And it's nice to, again, it's just to be forced to go through that consequence of losing that battle or maybe losing a war or something like that. Not being able to sort of reload that is going to be a good sort of learning experience, I think. Nothing wrong with restarting a few times. So we are in the game, and if we zoom out here, and funnily enough, right, the game doesn't look that dissimilar to the map where we're picking all the countries. It's just that some of it is sort of blurred out now, right? There's sort of like this terra incognita, sort of where we once saw, Southern Africa and Asia and stuff like that, right? We're playing as Muscovy here. This sort of, we could see our name, and we can see that Muscovy's kind of, just visually looking at it, it's kind of a weird shaped thing. And it's kind of blending a little bit with some of these other nations nearby, like Perm and the Great Horde. It's kind of making it confusing where our borders are and stuff like that. So we're playing as Muscovy, though. And we could just look around and we could see all these other countries are still in the game, right? They're not gone or anything like that. In fact, we're playing Muscovy. The AI, the computer, is actively individually simulating the other 400 nations in the match. So we pick Muscovy, the computer's going to play all the others. What that means is that, in the way that the computer does that, is that it looks out for number 1, right? The computer is individually playing Poland to try to do the best it can with Poland, and individually playing Lithuania to try to do the best it can with Lithuania, and individually playing the Ottomans, and so on and so forth. So every country is looking out for number 1. Now that doesn't mean that every country is just going to, mercilessly attack its neighbors and just go on a full conquest. No, it's going to be playing to its strengths, right? That could be diplomacy in certain situations. That could be aggression in other situations. It's going to be pursuing its own goals and ambitions in the game, as it pertains to that specific nation. And we're going to be trying to do the same as Muscovy to the best of our ability. So if we're just clicking on Muscovy here, we can see some different banners popping up and some different symbols and stuff. We can see our crest up here, so we can kind of see these little stacks over here of numbers and such belong to us, I guess, right? And we can sort of highlight over them like we're playing StarCraft or something, just box select them. And we can see this is an army. This is the second army. And over here we have the first army. And we can zoom in and we can see a little guy standing here. We can see that that's a K, 12K, 12,000 troops are standing here. 9,000 of those are infantry. 3,000 of those are cavalry. We don't have any cannons here. Turns out cannons are not actually in the game in 1444. It'll take a few years before we start adding those to our military. Get the technology for the cannons. But we can see we actually start the game with standing armies, and that's all these little banners are. I just like to explain that early because I think when people look at the map, they're like, "Oh, this is so confusing." Well, if we zoom out just enough, this isn't so confusing anymore. These are just the countries, right? And if we zoom in, the only thing we can physically see on the map in the game world is the actual standing armies, right? These guys have 4,000 troops. These guys have 6,000 troops, Kazan 14,000 troops, so on and so forth, right? We can go around and see, and it kind of helps actually identify where we have little nations sort of tucked in here, right? This is a different nation. They have a different crest compared to this nation here. And then we can also see that clearly they have different names. But as we zoom in, we can also see that the world is broken into different provinces. And that's just kind of how the map is broken down. So Muscovy is a state, is a nation that consists of all these provinces at the start of the game. There we go. And we're kind of slithering around here and so on and so forth. And it looks like this is our capital here in Muscov. And there you go. And that's essentially the map. And then on the sort of UI, we have a bunch of craziness over here, a bunch of craziness down here, buttons down here, buttons up here. It's actually rather sort of confusing and cryptic, and you don't really know where to look. I will say that one important thing right now is that we are paused. This is a real-time strategy game. If we hit the spacebar, we'll unpause the game, and time will continue to flow until we pause the game again. We can pause the game anytime we want. We can pause, unpause, pause, unpause. That's not a problem. It's not a problem. We can pause as much as we want. We can adjust the game speed over here, and I'm going to adjust it to 3. 5 is very fast, and 1 is very slow. So 3 or 2. Maybe we'll start with 2 at first. I usually play about speed 3 myself, and then depending on the situation, what's going on, you could go up to 4, go down to 2 in a war or something like that. So you can kind of float the game speed how you want, and then of course you can always pause whenever you want. So it's not too big of a deal, but the game speed is. We'll see how that works when we unpause the game, which will be in a while, right? There's a lot to look at right now. We need to look at our sort of diplomatic ecosystem. We need to look at our internal system, right? There's so many things to look at the start of the game to get our situation set up. It's like, what do we do? Like, yeah, great. Carex, you told me we're Muscovy. What does that mean? What do we do? Like, how do we know who to pursue war against? How do we know who to pursue positive diplomatic relations against? How do we know any of this stuff, right? Well, we're going to start working through that. So essentially what we can do is just like we can click on our own country and click on these provinces, and it brings up a province screen. This is not really that particularly important to us right now. A ton of information here about this specific region of Muscovy. But just like we can click on our own country, we're going to actually click on other countries, and we can actually see something on their province screens that's sort of a summary for their actual nation's attitude towards us. Novgorod, for example, here is a rival. So this is really the only thing I'm looking at. They have a crest here, and I can open their crest and it can go to their diplomacy screen. And we can see that they have some enemies and they have some rivals, and we're one of their rivals. And that confirms that when we click on their province and we see that their opinion of us is negative 176. So for example, if we wanted to think about allying Novgorod, not possible, right? Novgorod hates us. Novgorod hates us. In fact, we have a red flashing banner up here that says too few rivals. These banners up here are actually a really good aid to kind of get us started a little bit. So we can kind of go through these and just kind of work through, what is this telling us? These are some notifications about our country. It's somewhere where we can start. But one of the things we're really going to try to do from a macro perspective right now is try to figure out who can we potentially create positive relationships with, and who are we going to actually be at odds with, right? And it looks like Novgorod's actually going to be a primary enemy of our country, just because they've announced to the world that we are their rival. And that probably means that we just won't be able to be friends. That's going to draw a diplomatic battle line that other people can sort of pick a side. Like Lithuania could try to pick a side in that. Are they going to side with us? Are they going to side with Novgorod? So on and so forth. These other nations, because of that rivalry that we're going to create with Novgorod, or that Novgorod has created with us, it's going to create a diplomatic battle line for this region around sort of like, whose side are you on, kind of a situation, right? And stuff like that. So we'll be able to kind of work through here and see what some of these other disputed successions, totally not important right now. This has to do with personal unions in like countries that don't have a solid claim to their throne, and sort of are vulnerable of falling into personal. We're not interested in that at all. As a new player and as Muscovy, it's not. We're not. If we're Austria or something like that, they play a very sort of diplomatic kind of a game. Muscovy is a little bit of we're a very powerful nation. You can see in the region we have 22,000 troops. We're looking around, we don't see anything that looks that. In Novgorod here with 13,000 troops, we don't know for sure if that's their entire army or not, but I will tell you guys as a spoiler that Muscovy is very powerful. Very, very powerful. So we are likely going to be taking what we want with force. And we'll see how things kind of gear us towards that and how we know that and what sort of tells us to do that as we move through some of the different setup things here for the country. Too few advisor slots. Okay, again, green is not as important, right? The green ones are really not that important. It says we don't have any advisors. We can click on this and it brings up our court screen, and we can see there's no advisors here. The tricky thing about the advisors is you can't necessarily afford these guys because they cost a certain amount per month. We don't know anything about this. We don't know what production efficiency is. We don't know. It says it costs 14 gold ducats, something, right? Some sort of coin, 14 coins. Well, it turns out we do have some treasury up here, right? We have a certain amount of ducats, a certain amount of coin, a certain amount of gold. And it costs us 1 per month. So there's an upkeep to paying these advisors. We don't know if we can actually afford that because we haven't looked at our economy screen. So I'm actually gonna skip that one for now. Low Crownland. Okay, this is relating to a very nuanced thing. These are internal situations. Unrest, this is also an internal situation. We are going to want to talk about our internal situation. We do have a little bit of provincial unrest. That's interesting. That'll definitely be something worth checking out. But let's go to this red one really quick. Too few rivals. We have too few rivals. We click on this, it brings up our own diplomacy screen. And we can see here that actually Denmark has rivaled us. And Novgorod has rivaled us. That's what this means when it says these are our enemies. Novgorod and Denmark. Denmark's not really that relevant, right? They're kind of far away. We don't even have a navy, right? We are completely landlocked. One of the reasons why Muscovy is actually kind of a good beginner nation is we don't really have to deal with sort of, our military is more simplified in the sense that it's a standing army. We do not have a navy. We do not have a navy, and that's going to simplify our military a little bit, our units and stuff a little bit, rather than having to sort of manage the navy as well. So Denmark might have rivaled us, but I don't know if we really care that much about Denmark. So we could look here and we could see these are our available rivals, right? And we definitely probably want to rival Novgorod because they rivaled us. And the thing is, when we rival people, right, again, we're creating those diplomatic battle lines. But the other thing that we're doing is we're actually making it easier for there to be conflict between Novgorod and ourselves. It's easier to go to war with Novgorod. It's easier to justify to the world that we have a rightful reason to go to war because we are like historical rivals in a sense. We are just sort of like everybody knows that we don't like each other and we just can't stand each other. And you know, one of us has to go. One of us has to be removed, and it's either him or me. You know what I mean? It's kind of the situation there. So by making a rivalry with Novgorod, it actually gives us some tools against them to more easily create conflict and actually create reasons to go to war, just reasons to go to war. We'll see how that works in a second, because right now we're at peace. Our country is at peace. Every country in the world is at peace right now. And war is something that we have to work up. We have to build up to war. We have to build up the diplomatic justification for war. We have to build up the physical sort of preparations, the actual military preparations, the economic preparations for war. And then when we go to war, we're actually in a war for a reason. We have an objective. We have a war goal when we're in a war. And so the reasons why you go to war and how you build up that justification is important. That's a huge part of the game, and we'll see how that works. So Denmark, we know Denmark doesn't like us, right? It says here their opinion. It gives us a summary, not negative 110 for Denmark. Denmark is, and it says over here they've actually rivaled us. Kazan doesn't like us at all. So it's saying we could rival Kazan, we could rival the Great Horde, we could rival Lithuania. Lithuania actually is neutral towards us. They have a negative opinion because it looks like we are a neighboring heretic. We are a heretic religion. So now we've learned that religious term or sort of different religious stances, right? Our country is fundamentally recognized as a different. The Lithuanians believe our religion that we believe in it makes us a heretic basically to them, right? So Lithuania is a Catholic, right? Is a Catholic nation. We are an Orthodox nation. We can see that here, but also there is a fancy religious map mode. We haven't talked about the map mode. So this is the world, right? This is the political map mode. This is how you can easily distinguish who's who. But if we click on the religious screen, we can see the world in a different perspective. And obviously it's hard to tell who's who from this screen, but we can see that we're up here, right? So we're Orthodox, like, and this is good. There's a lot of Orthodox people that live in this region. However, this is wavy lines to say that, yes, the state religion is Catholic, but the people here believe in Orthodox. They are Orthodox people, even though the state itself is Catholic. So Lithuania actually has a lot of Orthodox people that, to be completely honest, kind of like are being oppressed in a sense that at this time, you know, the state religion would have sort of dictated certain rights and sort of basically would have, you know, basically caused certain policies and things that would have been somewhat limiting, right? The whole you know, we take for granted the idea of, you know, freedom of religion, right? That this is the year 1444, so we're a little before that notion, especially in Europe, as a lot of wars, a lot of bloodshed is going to be fought over religious turmoil in the next few hundred years in the game, and that's simulated in the game. That conflict, that the reformations and stuff that happened. So basically what I'm saying is these people fundamentally are displeased and somewhat displeased that there's actually a little bit of unrest in their provinces because of this religious intolerance that Lithuania is showing to some of its people, a big chunk of its people actually. But we are Orthodox, and everybody up here is happy to be in an Orthodox state, and so on and so forth. So we've learned that religion, though, plays into diplomacy, right? So let's go back to that rivalry screen here. And if we look at like Kazan and the Great Horde, they're Sunni. I mean, they're Islam, completely different sort of religious views there. And these guys, I mean, completely hostile, larger negative opinion than Lithuania. But basically what I'm saying is we could work with Lithuania, right? Right now they're neutral. They're negative 13. That's not nearly as severe as negative 200 with Novgorod. Novgorod, that is the lowest it can go. Novgorod will never be friends with us. We'll never be friends with them. There's complete distrust and hate for each other. Lithuania, though, they're neutral. I mean, they're right on that line. We could work with them potentially. Kazan is hostile towards us with a negative 73. They do not like us. They desire some of our land. They do not trust us. All kinds of negative things there. Of course, we're different religion. We should rival Kazan. And, you know, just like it is probably our destiny to come up here and conquer this land and unify sort of the Russian region, it's also going to be our destiny to come down here and sort of solidify a lot of this area down here against Kazan. One more rival slot, and we do want to pick all of our available rivals because, again, this gives us advantages against these countries. And again, the Great Horde, they like us a little bit less. They also have a weaker army. This says that their army is 25% weaker than ours. They also don't have a navy. Neither does Lithuania. Lithuania actually has a slightly stronger army than us. Might be worth rivaling the weaker of the two and actually potentially buttering up Lithuania. One thing we could do is we could actually try to befriend Lithuania, or we could even look more inland and look at Poland. Maybe Poland would be willing to... Poland is even more powerful than Lithuania, even if it doesn't quite show that in terms of land. This land is more developed, it's more rich. And also we were talking about instability, right? Lithuania has stability issues at the beginning of the game because of a lack of religious unity. That causes a lot of internal conflict for Lithuania. So, but Poland, it looks like, they won't necessarily ally us right away, but they're kind of on that line of neutral, and we might be able to sort of sway them in a direction that they might like us. But if we click on some other people here, Crimea, kind of neutral. Great Horde doesn't like us because we've rivaled them. That makes sense. Nogai is kind of the same situation as these countries, but they're kind of far away. Livonian Order doesn't like us. In fact, they're threatened by us, right? So we could just click on countries, right? All I'm doing, Riga likes us. Friendly attitude. Negative opinion, but a friendly attitude, which means Riga will absolutely ally us. If we go into... So what I'm doing here is I'm just going from here to diplomacy, and I'm just opening up these diplomatic actions. There's so many different diplomatic actions you can take. It is insane. You can royal marriage, except for I think Riga is a republic, so they don't actually do royal marriages because they are a republic. This guy is not a monarch, right? This is someone that was elected into office, not born into office. But we can actually do an alliance here. We can do an alliance. whereas Poland will not accept an alliance. And we can see that big X right there says we can't do it. We can send them we could be like, please send us alliance, but it says no. No, they will not accept. There is no guessing when it comes to this stuff. They either will or they won't. In this case, +7 reasons that they will and 32 reasons they won't. And again, this isn't a chance. This is a guaranteed no. If that positive value is higher than the negative value, then it is guaranteed that they will. So it tells us the breakdown, though. Muscovy's diplomatic reputation. We have a good reputation. We have a good reputation, and Poland recognizes that. We haven't done anything to cause distrust among people diplomatically. Of course, the game just started, so it defaults to a little bit of a benefit of the doubt system with diplomatic reputation. Muscovy has army strength. We have a good army. We have a strong army, and Poland respects that, but Poland also has a strong army, right? If we click on Riga and we see their modifiers, we can see that we're getting +20 for army strength, right? Because we have a much stronger army than Riga. Riga has a very small army at the start of the game. Poland has a powerful army too. We're both relatively equal in that sense, but we have a slightly stronger army than Poland, and Poland appreciates that. And they're willing to give us a few points, but it's not nearly the +20 that we got with Riga, right? So altogether, that's only +7 reasons. And then they're neutral towards us, so being neutral doesn't really drive positive interaction, right? You don't want to just make alliances with people you're just sort of so-so about. You want to make alliances with people that you really like, that you're friendly with, right? So we could try to change their attitude of us by boosting their opinion of us, because right now they have a negative opinion. In fact, that's actually a modifier too, not the same religion, neutral attitude, and opinion. But we can potentially change this by improving relations, okay? If we said, do you want to send our diplomat to improve relations with Poland? Yes, we do. We want to send we have 2 available diplomats. We want to send one of those to improve relations with Poland and potentially get that alliance with Poland by buttering them up. In fact, their -10 is now a +6. We've added 4 modifier for improved relations. This will increase by about 3 or 4 per month until it gets to +100. The maximum is +200 for total opinion, but the maximum that we can get from the improved relations modifier is +100. So once we get this to 100, it'll be 100 from improved relations minus 10 from being a heretic, and that'll be a total of +90. And once we get to +90, it could be that his attitude will change from neutral to positive, and we'll also just get a much higher modifier here when it comes to opinion modifier and some other modifiers and things like that that will make Poland more likely to potentially ally us. Now, the other thing we can do with our diplomat is our diplomats are also spies, right? So we can go in here and, okay, well, just to summarize there, right? We can go into Poland, we can improve relations. That can sort of get into potentially doing a royal marriage or potentially doing an alliance or these other things that they won't accept right now. There's different diplomatic actions, different sort of economic actions, different all kinds of different things that we can do here, right, to influence these countries and to get them to kind of help us diplomatically, peacefully. So your diplomats are naturally the people that go and do this work. That diplomat is tied up. That diplomat is literally doing that now until we tell them to come home or until they finish by getting Poland up to +100 to improve relations. We have one more diplomat. That actually tells us, right, that we have diplomats. In fact, up here it says we have 2 diplomats. We haven't even mentioned that. We have 2 traders, no colonists, 2 diplomats, and 1 missionary. Right now our missionary is available. We have 1 more diplomat available. We just used one of our diplomats. We just tied that up. And what we could do with this diplomat is we can actually use this diplomat as a spy. So we can actually click on a country like Novgorod, who is our mortal enemy, and we can actually go down to the covert actions, and we can build a spy network. And what this is going to allow us to do is it's actually going to allow us to create justification for war. Again, we need a reason to go to war with Novgorod. And if we fabricate claims on their land, if we have reasons and claims for their land, then that will be our reason for war. That'll be our justification for conflict against Novgorod. So what we're going to do with our other diplomat is actually send this to Novgorod to build a spy network. And just like with the improved relations diplomat that's going to actively boost up our relationship, their opinion of us, our spy network, espionage or spy, is going to go to Novgorod and build up a different value related to spy network. It's not opinion. It's not the opinion, but it is a spy network that we can then spend like a currency. In fact, it says we need 20 spy network before we can make a claim, before we can fabricate a claim on one of Novgorod's provinces. We're talking about making we're talking about making a claim on one of their actual provinces so that we can take that in war. And in fact, we could take stuff in war kind of willy-nilly, but we can't go to war willy-nilly. So, but by fabricating claim, we'll get a casus belli, a cause for war, a reason to go to war. And that's going to be a very, very important step. So what we've done so far is we've kind of looked at the surrounding area. One thing we can do is when we click on people, there's a little bit of a summary here of their relationships. Like if we click on these smaller nations here who actually really like us. In fact, wait a second. This nation right here, Yaroslavl, sorry guys, I can't pronounce this stuff. I'm being a doofus here. Is a vassal of Muscovy. Wait a second, this is a vassal of Muscovy. And there's a little blue behind its little 3000. This guy's got a little blue too. He's a vassal too. In fact, if we click on our country and we go to our, so we looked at the religious map mode. Now let's look at the diplomatic map mode. Okay, if we go to the diplomatic map mode, boom. It highlights the world based on our diplomatic relations. If Poland was an ally, they would be in blue, and we'll see that in the future. But right now we can see that we have a bunch of little nations here that are in teal. These are all of our vassals. These are puppet nations that are that basically work for us, right? They serve us. They pay us a tribute. These are military armies that we will be able to utilize in war. In fact, we've already unified a lot of this region. There's not nearly as many sort of quote enemies in this region as it seems, right? These nations down here seem to be independent, right? Just by process of elimination. These ones right here are independent, but otherwise it's just these big ones. Great Horde, Kazan, Novgorod, Lithuania. And a lot of these smaller nations in here actually are subjects. So these are units and nations that will help us when we fight the war against Novgorod. So that's actually going to be a total of what seems to be 14,000 additional armies, 14,000 additional regiments, or 14,000 troops made up of 14 regiments. So that's actually really cool. So Muscovy, one of the reasons why Muscovy is very, very powerful is not just our standing army, but the collective force of our entire coalition here, basically. So these little nations here actually are friends. And one thing we could want to do, they're already sort of our subjects. And one thing we could actually do is we could try to improve relations with our subjects. But it looks like at the start of the game, it looks like for the most part, they're all very happy with us. But it might be worth actually sort of bolstering our relationship by getting royal marriages with these nations, which can give us some added yearly legitimacy and also give us a higher likelihood of getting heirs. So, and just sort of shore up our relationship, right? If we can get royal marriages with these countries, then it'll just sort of really lock in good positive relationships. Because what we're trying to do with our subjects is keep them happy, right? They only serve us if they're happy. They actually have an opinion of us. And if that opinion goes sour, they can actually sort of turn hostile and start actively sabotaging us and working against us. And they could actually fight for their own independence. And ideally, we would want to avoid those kind of wars, right? We would want to avoid that kind of conflict if we could. So we've looked at the situation. We know that Muscovy is sort of in this diplomatic situation at the start of the game. Lots of little vassal nations. We're trying to work on Poland. If we click on Poland, we could see, wait a second, Poland has a vassal too. And it looks like they're guaranteeing the independence of Moldova, but they have a vassal over Mazovia here. So we could just click on other nations to see if they already have. Hungary has Croatia as a subject, or under them in a personal union, right? If we click on Denmark, okay, Denmark's actually quite a bit more powerful than we thought. Teal, right? That means Denmark actually controls Sweden and Norway as a personal union, has a personal union over Norway and Sweden. So that's actually a very powerful blob right there of 3 unified countries, as long as they stay loyal. But Sweden actually might not stay loyal because Sweden's a very powerful nation. The more powerful, see, our little subjects are pretty weak and small, but when they get very powerful like Sweden, they can actually sort of be like, hey, wait a second, why am I serving you? I'm like a powerful nation. I should be independent. And they'll kind of start to have a mind of their own, and they'll try to seek out their own independence. Novgorod, we can see what's going on with them. Novgorod has some little stripy bits over here to say that they believe that this is their land already. They believe that this is rightfully theirs. However, they don't have any relations at the start of the game. However, when we unpause the game, they will try to make alliances. They will try to form alliances. They will try to work on building up their diplomatic strengths. Just like we're trying to work on Poland, Novgorod will start working on other people too. So while they don't have any sort of subjects at the start of the game, they can work to try to achieve alliances and other sort of diplomatic relationships with other nations as we start the game. But at the beginning of the game, typically none of the nations will have alliances with each other. That's what you do at the start of the game, is you form those alliances when the game first starts. All right, guys. We've taken a look at Muscovy, our diplomatic situation. So for the most part, this is why I like Muscovy so much. It's really not that particularly complicated of an ecosystem, and that's what this game is. It's about assessing the ecosystems. We have the Great Horde in Kazan and Novgorod, and they all hate us. They don't like us. We got some Sunnis down here. We got Novgorod as just a historical rival. Lithuania is kind of neutral towards us. They don't really hate us. They don't like us. They're just kind of there. And then we have a bunch of smaller guys, and some of these smaller guys are actually servants of ours, right? Puppets of ours. So that's nothing to worry about. We're building a spy network against Novgorod so that we can go to war against Novgorod. We are using a diplomat to butter up relationship with Poland so that we could maybe use Poland as an ally, right? Poland's a little bit farther away, so the nice thing is we're not going to be directly attacking Poland. We can actually use Poland to potentially help us against Lithuania, help us against the Livonian Order, maybe help us against Crimea or the Great Horde, right? Poland could be an aid. Because they're not next to us, there's a little bit of a buffer between us and them. It'll keep us friendly with each other. Sometimes border tension is a thing, right? The fact that we're bordered with Lithuania actually creates a tension over time. As they start to desire our land, we start to desire their land. Sometimes it's nice to actually have your alliances be a little bit removed from your country, but not so removed. Like France, for example, doesn't care about us. If we click on France, they just do not care. There's no way they're going to ally us, just looking at France as an example, and minus 130 reasons. Distance between borders. We're too far away. They just do not care, right? But Poland's close enough that they kind of care. So that could be something worth pursuing. So we've looked at our diplomatic situation. On the next episode, we need to take a look at our internal situation, right? How's our economy doing? What is our military looking like? Should we build a bigger military? What is Novgorod? What's going on with Novgorod's internal situation? Do we win the war against Novgorod? When can we declare the war against Novgorod? How do we actually continue to work on that process of getting to war with Novgorod? What are our missions? What are our goals? What are we actually trying to accomplish with Muscovy? What can we sort of try to target for the future for future expansion and stuff like that? And how do we form Russia, right? Because Muscovy is destined to form Russia. So how do we do that? And we can look at all of these internal things and goals and ambitions and stuff for our country of Muscovy in the next episode. Guys, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out. We do play a lot of Europa Universalis 4 on the Twitch as well, so there's a link to that down below. You can come and ask questions in real time and get specific answers. Otherwise, we're going to continue on this no DLC beginner playthrough here, and just looking at how to get started in this game, which is kind of a complicated process of a process, right? So we're trying to just go through it slowly and step by step and just go with the flow. So thanks everybody for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one.